What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to TTB Ravens Media, bringing Ravens content every single day. If you want to stay to the Ravens content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below and hit the notification bell as well if you want to get notified every single time I put a brand new video. Now, this video, it's probably going to end up being relatively long because I'm going over every single Ravens undrafted free agent that they have signed so far. If they end up signing more players, I will probably make an update video, and the Ravens signed a lot of them. So please let me know which undrafted free agents are you looking forward to. And the reason I put out these types of videos is because, you know, I'm not a huge fan of having to research every single player individually, so I like to put out these types of videos to go over them so you don't have to go to every single individual scouting report and highlight tapes and, you know, to do your own research on them. So I put this out there. If you have more things to add on these players, please do so in the comment section down below. But I'm going to start off by going over my 3 favorite players that the Ravens signed, and then I will get into everybody else. And I want to preface this entire thing by saying I'm not rooting against any of these players. I hope all of them have success. I hope all of them are able to make the team. I'm just going to be highlighting like whether or not I think they will make the team, not whether or not I think I want them to make the team. Because honestly, I like a lot of these guys. You know, I think a lot of these guys have potential in the NFL. But unfortunately, there's only 53 guys allowed on a roster. So hopefully, I'm rooting for all of them. However, we're going to see how it all works out. But starting off, my favorite player the Ravens went out and signed is a guy that I actually watched when he was in college. Coming out of Navy, Diego Fago. Man, this guy is really a Baltimore Raven. He, I think, has a very good chance at making this roster because what is he? He plays with heart, he plays with physicality, and he's a leader. The Navy defense went with Diego Fago, okay? And I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly. It may be different emphasis. Maybe it's on the A or the O. I don't know 100% how to pronounce it exactly. I know it's something like Diego Fago, so that's what I'm going to say. I apologize if I'm saying it incorrectly. However, Navy plays in an interesting division or conference in college football. They run the ball a ton, and that's where his strengths come in. You know, he comes in being physical and attacking the ball with 100% effort on every single play. That defense went and fell with Diego consistently. And you couldn't watch Navy football without hearing his name. And I watched some Navy football games and I recognized him. And when I saw the Ravens signed him, I was excited. Because I think he really does have potential, especially with the Baltimore Ravens. Because we love guys that play physical, guys that play with heart, and guys that are very upstanding, good leaders. Those are all of the traits that he's going to bring. I think the Ravens need depth at the linebacker spot, guys to play special teams, and I think he is willing enough to get better in the pass coverage. He just doesn't have a lot of experience playing defense in the past. However, I think he can become a decent pass defender. But man, you want this guy in 3rd and short, in 2nd and short, in goal line situations. He is the guy that you want on your team. Because what is Army, what is Navy, what is the Air Force Academy built on? Goal line formation, getting 1 to 3 yards every time. What does the defense have to do? Stop that. That is what he did. That is what his job was to do, was to make sure they held their ground. I think he'd be a great fit in Baltimore. So he's definitely my favorite player. There's other guys that I really like. But getting into the next player, we signed a couple of wide receivers. My favorite wide receiver we ended up bringing in was Mekhi Polk. You know, he played at Mississippi State last year. However, he played 2 years over at Cal. Wasn't able to really set himself apart at Cal. However, he ended up transferring to Mississippi State. Got pretty good production, actually. But what he brings is he brings size and he brings physicality and good hands in traffic. He's someone that can attack the ball with his hands or bring it into his chest and make sure that he holds on to it. He's not afraid to go over the middle. He's not afraid to make tough sideline catches. He's not afraid to go up and get a jump ball. What does that sound like? Oh, the exact type of wide receiver the Baltimore Ravens need. So I really like him as that sort of profile, that sort of player that the Ravens could bring in. Because, you know, I think the Ravens do need that big body, and he will be able to compete with guys like Benjamin Victor for that lower end roster spot as the wide receiver. You know, I'm not saying he's going to be wide receiver 1 this season. I'm saying he has a chance to compete to be wide receiver 7 and potentially get onto that 53-man roster. But I like his potential. His 40-yard dash was in the 4.5s. It was a 4.59, but he got into the 4.5s, which is very nice to see. But really good size, good physicality. I think he does fill a void that the Ravens have. The final player that I really love would be Charles Wiley. Now, Charles Wiley is a very electric athlete. He's coming out of UTSA, University of Texas San Antonio, which, if you didn't know, same school Tariq Woolen came out of. A lot of people, including myself, wanted the Ravens to target him. However, Mr. Charles Wiley ended up being a very good athlete and a dynamic edge player for UTSA. I think that's what the Ravens are going to have to get with him, is try and work it with him and develop his athleticism into traits that he can utilize on the football field. But this is a guy where, he wouldn't be terrible if you threw him in special teams. I think he could definitely contribute there with his athleticism. I'm not saying he's the greatest athlete of all time. He ran at a 4.5 40-yard dash, a low 4.5, which for an edge player is really solid. He's got good size at I believe around 6'2". So he's a good athlete that I think the Ravens could use, and I think he's really going to come in and compete for that back-end roster spot, because the Ravens just sometimes need guys for special teams. He potentially could be one of those players. So I do like Charles Wiley. I think, with his athleticism, the Ravens could develop him. Remember, the Ravens brought in Mr. Mike Macdonald, a former linebackers coach. He's an outside linebacker or edge rusher, basically, depending on the scheme, different positions, but same position at the same time. So I do like him. I think Mike Macdonald could definitely work with him. He has a chance to definitely be a practice squad player for the Ravens for this year, potentially get in on special teams. So those are kind of the three guys that I'm really looking forward to watching, compete throughout training camp and whatnot. But now I'm going to get into the rest of the players, and I apologize if I don't spend enough time on players. If you guys want me to go more in depth, I can. I can talk about them on live streams and things like that. But there's I don't even want to count. There's 15 guys. So let's get into it. Let's talk about Mr. Brodarious Ham, offensive tackle out of Auburn. Now, the Ravens need depth at the offensive tackle position. They obviously drafted Daniel Falele. However, Brodarious Ham, I think, is another practice squad potential player that could compete for a backup offensive tackle position. However, the Ravens just need guys to work with, and I think he's a really solid signing. Get an offensive lineman coming out of the SEC, is always going to be beneficial when you're trying to practice against teams, because he at least has that experience of going against, the Georgia Bulldogs and the Alabama Crimson Tide and the LSU Tigers, all teams that have put out very good edge rushers in recent years. So I think that's a really good signing. Coming out of Auburn. The next guy is Mr. Chris Moore. Not the Ravens' former Chris Moore. Chris Moore, the safety out of Georgia State. The biggest thing with him is, he's a 6'1", physical. He could be a box safety, maybe an outside linebacker. The best comparison, honestly, would maybe be an Anthony Levine type player, where he would be a guy to play on special teams with physicality and hit power. That's basically what he's bringing to the table. He's not the fastest guy. He's definitely not the biggest, but he does have potential to maybe be a contributor on special teams and be that, Anthony Levine type of player if he ends up getting that opportunity. But guys, there's so many guys competing for spots. A lot of players, I'm going to say, they can compete on special teams, because that's a lot of times why you bring in undrafted free agents. So I apologize if I'm getting repetitive with saying that, but I do like him, with his hit power and physicality to potentially, battle for one of those roster spots. Next guy is a wide receiver out of the University of Alabama, and you may say, "Wow, Alabama wide receiver to the Ravens." Yeah, this isn't a drafted wide receiver to the Ravens. Slade Bolden is an interesting prospect, because he was the guy in the middle for the Alabama Crimson Tide when they had Mac Jones, last year when they had Bryce Young. He is a very solid slot wide receiver. He can run good routes. He's quick on his feet. He has really good hands. The issue is he's not dynamic after the catch. He's not the greatest athlete. However, you just look at him and he's kind of a typical slot receiver. A traditional slot wide receiver. Nowadays, we have players like Keenan Allen. We have players like, honestly, Devin Duvernay, you can consider a slot wide receiver, who are very athletic, very dynamic with the ball in their hands. Slade Bolden is not going to be that player. However, he does have a little bit of punt returning experience, so if the Ravens want to look at him on that side of things, they definitely could. But he's definitely a good guy to have in camp. Just having an extra wide receiver, for the other teams to throw to. So I don't hate this signing whatsoever. I don't know how likely it is that he makes the team. I'm rooting for him, but he's a slot receiver. We have a couple of slot receivers already, so it's going to be difficult. But he is coming out of Alabama, which is, which gives you very pro-ready wide receivers, especially in recent years. Next player is Tyler Johnson, not the wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but the defensive lineman out of Arizona State. The Ravens, obviously, they did not get the main defensive lineman a lot of people were hoping for in Mr. Jordan Davis, but they did get Travis Jones. So we're going to see, what they end up trying to do with Tyler Johnson. He could definitely just be a camp body. He can definitely fight for the back end of that defensive line, spot. He's a decent athlete. He does have a tendency. He has missed a couple of tackles. However, very physical. He can rush the passer, so that is something to look at. So he's not a bad player by any means. A pass rushing interior defensive lineman. You can never have too many of those. So not a bad guy right there to have. The next player is Anthony Brown. He's a quarterback. He is there to be a camp body. He's a quarterback. I don't think he has a great chance of making the 53-man roster unless the Ravens end up trading a guy like Tyler Huntley. They're not trading Lamar Jackson. So Anthony Brown, he's an experienced leader of an offense with the Oregon Ducks. So, that's at least a good player to have, in camp, going out and throwing to wide receivers, having an experienced quarterback like him. So I think that's a good signing, good body to have. Next player is another Cal wide receiver, even though Mackay ended up transferring. We have Trayvon Clark. Now, he's another big body, 6'3" player, and he's just another big body wide receiver coming out of Cal. He can make difficult catches, but he's pretty. I don't want to call him slow. He ran a 4.69 40-yard dash, which is not the fastest by any means. So, if he can work on his route running, if he can, develop his route tree, he could end up making a roster in the NFL. However, at this point, I don't know if he's going to be able to compete with that back end spot unless he's really able to show and prove guys like me wrong who aren't confident yet in his abilities. However, I'm rooting for him. I hope he's able to make the roster. I hope he proves everybody wrong and he's able to be a contributing player for the Baltimore Ravens. Next player is Emeka Emezie, wide receiver out of NC State. Now, he's another big body wide receiver. It's interesting. The Ravens went after a lot of big bodies because that's what a lot of fans were calling for them to draft. They went with Emeka Emezie out of NC State, and he is not someone with the sturdiest hands. And as a big body, hopefully, you want him to be like a jump ball wide receiver at 6'3". However, he doesn't have great hands. He can drop some easy passes, and that's something that is a little bit scary to me. However, he does have good quickness. He can break the press really well. He's got decent athleticism. So, we're going to see what he's able to do with Baltimore. But, another wide receiver to compete for that back-end roster spot. It's stirring up competition, but it's going to bring out the best in a lot of players. So I definitely do like that signing. Bringing in a wide receiver is never going to hurt. Next player is a quarterback, Trey Ford. The reason why he's here, he ran a 4.4 40-yard dash as a quarterback. So that's very good for the Baltimore Ravens to have because we got Lamar Jackson and Tyler Huntley as our two main quarterbacks. Those guys are incredibly fast. So when you're in training camp, you're in mini camp, and you're blocking for a guy, and Lamar and Tyler Huntley aren't there, it's difficult to, get the scramble drill going. We talk about it, all the time whenever teams play the Ravens. They have to practice, and they're like, well, we threw in a wide receiver at quarterback because we wanted to test, the quarterback running out of the pocket. This gives the offensive lineman a simulation of, okay, that's the speed maybe that we're dealing with. They're really fast. They can get out of the pocket. And the defense understanding, how to take those angles and things like that. So I do like that signing. Doubt he makes a 53-man roster, but a really good player to have on that, in the camps and things like that. Next player is Jacoby Mclean, linebacker out of Auburn. A little bit slower as a linebacker. However, he is a good run defender. He needs to work on his pass defense a little bit. And, he does have a little bit of a tackling problem, which does scare me. However, he is coming out of, Auburn, playing in the SEC. So he does have, he has played against very top-end competition. If he can make it on the team, he would be as a special teams player, maybe a very back-end depth at the linebacker spot. But, not a bad player by any means, coming out of a good conference. Next player is Jeremiah Moon, another linebacker coming out of the SEC. Now, he ran a really terrible 40. He ran a 4.76 40-yard dash. However, he does have really good instincts. He is a really good athlete. He has a really good build at 6'5", 249 pounds. So, he's quick. He doesn't have great speed. He's able to attack the ball with physicality. He's just not the, he doesn't have the instincts that maybe you would hope for, a player to have yet, but he's young, and he does have a little bit of an injury history. But, potentially a special teams player with that, ferocity at attacking, players holding the ball. Next player is another NC State player, Mr. Ricky Person Jr., running back, and, he's a guy that's a pass-catching running back, a dynamic, route runner, pass catcher. I think he's a very good guy to have in camp, very good guy to potentially have on the practice squad throughout the year in case there is an injury and we need someone to go out there and catch balls, as a running back out of the backfield. I think he's a really solid player to have. Next player is Mr. J. Ross. But it's not Justin Ross. It's Josh Ross, linebacker out of Michigan. This is probably the most popular pick of the undrafted players to make the roster. Why? Because he's coming out of Michigan. And he's a two-time captain at Michigan. He's a leader at Michigan. If you don't know, Mike Macdonald, the defensive coordinator, was the defensive coordinator at Michigan, and he's a linebackers coach. So he's very familiar with Josh Ross. And so, the Ravens are bringing him because he is a leader. And, obviously John Harbaugh likes him, Jim Harbaugh likes him, and Mike Macdonald definitely likes him. So the reason why they're bringing him in, hard worker, it's why they bring in any Michigan player, really. Hard worker, good character traits, and they know him. You know what you're going to get with Josh Ross. That's the benefit of him. Next player is Denzel Williams out of Villanova University. He's a cornerback. He's a man-to-man cornerback. That's really all you can find on him. That's about it. He's a very, very intelligent football player. There's interviews with him talking about him, himself as a football player, but he's very, very intelligent, and as a man coverage corner at 5'10" with a 4.4 40-yard dash, he could potentially be a slot, a nickel cornerback, if given the opportunity. So not a bad signing right there. The Ravens need that cornerback depth. The next player, there's only 3 more players, including this next one, so don't worry. I'm working on it. We got Devin Williams out of Oregon, and he's another big body, 6'5" wide receiver. You know what I thought was so funny? I ended up tweeting this. I wanted to look up his NFL, draft profile. Guess who his comparison was? Jaleel Scott. Remember him? Ravens drafted him in the 5th round. He's a talent. He's a potential guy. 6'5", very good arms, very good length, good size, good hands. Doesn't have the best route trees. Coming out of Oregon where they don't run a dynamic route tree or anything like that for those players. However, he did, he was able to play, with, what's funny is we also brought in his quarterback, but overall, athletic, good build, potential guy. I don't think he'll make it the roster this year. However, if the Ravens keep him on the practice squad, he could eventually make it, in years to come if he's able to develop in that way. The next player, defensive tackle, Rashad Nichols out of Stephen F. Austin State. Defensive tackle, physical, powerful, 307 pounds. Another good guy to throw in at the depth in that defensive line. We're going to see if he's able to compete, maybe become that player that can, fight for the back end of that roster spot with a couple of the other defensive tackles the Baltimore Ravens ended up signing. But I think it's a solid player to bring in, stir up that competition. Who's going to make that team? Who's going to make that spot, that last spot? Competition's always good there. And the final player is an offensive lineman out of South Dakota State, Mr. Aaron Johnson. Aaron Johnson going to be able to compete with the Ravens tackles. Again, bringing in competition. He's physical. He's big. He is coming out of a smaller school in South Dakota State. However, he was very productive there. So hopefully, he's able to be really solid. He's not going to falter at the quote-unquote increased competition in the NFL. I think he's a really good signing, good offensive lineman signing. But, guys, those are my takeaways on this, undrafted free agents. I'll go over my favorite players. The first guy, Mr. Diego Fago, Makai Polk, and then the outside linebacker, edge rusher hybrid in Mr., of course, Charles Wiley. Guys, let me know what you guys are thinking about these draft prospects, these free agent players the Ravens have brought in. I have some videos that are going to be coming out over the next couple of days. Joshua and I will most definitely be recapping the entire draft, grading everything, talking about predictions and things like that. But thank you so much for watching. Subscribe for daily Ravens content. I'll see all of you again